The Macabre World Podcast is brought to you by Darker Art Studio, home of real human bone jewelry. Stock and custom pieces are available, so visit us on the web at www.darkerartstudio.com and show them your darker art side. Macabre World, a podcast from Darker Art Studio, where we explore the dark, strange, and unusual from this world and beyond. Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of the Macabre World Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Digati, and with me is author Eve Lestrange. Eve, welcome. Very wonderful to have you. How are you doing this evening? What's going on?
Very good. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm honored that I'm on the premiere of Season 2.
You are indeed. I had the pleasure of very, very briefly, because it was a crazy busy show, meeting Eve at the Monster ManiaCon convention. And you're going to be at the Monster ManiaCon in Hunt Valley, Maryland, over on September 30th, correct?
Yeah, the 30th to the 2nd of October.
Okay, so that's coming up for you. And you have 4 books out or more?
4.
You have 4 books out. And so have you always been a writer?
No. Before that, I was a musician. I played with a band called the Empire Hideous. And when that broke up, I couldn't really find another band that I wanted to be with. Either the musicians were very good and they were flaky, or the musicians were very dedicated, but I just really didn't like the music. So but let me go back to writing, because I'd written some poems and short stories and stuff. But let me go back to that, because I need a creative outlet. I need something to do. And ever since then, I love it. I love doing it.
Now, was that your favorite subject in school? You big into English and
yeah. Oh yeah, English, history. Yeah.
Well, history's a blast, I have to admit.
Oh yeah.
I truly enjoy it. So what are your influences when you were and musically also is fun, but when you were trying to find, I always call it finding your voice, whether you're doing it creatively with music, with art, finding your style in art, or you're singing or whatever. When you're finding your voice, your creative voice, what were some of your influences?
Mostly H.P. Lovecraft. Not just for the stories that he wrote. He wrote great stories, but just the way he wrote them. He had such a beautiful literary style of writing things, and it transferred so well from the pages into your mind, so you can really picture it and see what was going on. And some of the things that he wasn't too descriptive on gives you a chance to use your own imagination.
Funny thing is, I'm from Rhode Island, and I was born in Providence. And I've walked along Benefit Street many a time. I used to work up on the east side of Providence, and I've been to Swan Point. There's some wonderful folks that do a great service to him at Swan Point. Shout out to Carl Johnson and that crew. They're wonderful there. And H.P. Lovecraft, I think one of the earmarks with him is that, like you said, it makes your imagination goes the extra mile. He gives you the setup and you run with it.
Oh yeah.
And I find that there are a lot of modern authors that do that same type of thing. That's a great literary device is to give somebody the setup, because I think it's inevitable that what we imagine will be far more, in the case of horror, what you imagine or envision is far worse than anything anyone could describe. Because I think we're all ghouls and pessimists at heart,
Oh yeah.
When everybody says, what's the worst that could happen? Nobody goes, oh, it can't be that bad. Everybody goes, oh God, I just saw the worst thing in my lifetime, and everybody's thinking it. So I love Lovecraft. Rats in the Wall is my favorite. Just because I have a great, a great affinity for that story. But I agree with you. He was, I think, a very, very much an influence on a lot of modern writers. And I think that's wonderful to have. So have you always been interested in all things dark and mysterious?
Oh yeah, ever since I was a kid. I mean, I remember the first horror movie I saw was a TV movie called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. I think I was 5 when I saw that. It was these little creatures, they came out of the wall and they would, like take people away. It was just a really creepy movie, and ever since then I've been hooked.
And do you have a favorite of all time horror movie?
I'd probably have to go with The Exorcist and The Bride
Oh
of
yeah.
Frankenstein.
Oh, nice. I think I almost want to say The Exorcist needs to come off the list because that's like a given at this point. I mean, myself as well. I think I grew up in a very excruciatingly Catholic house. So I think
Mm.
if you have the Catholic dogma instilled in you, that movie was so much scarier because you kind of got a little bit of a different flavor. But I always like to bring up Rosemary's Baby. I loved with it.
That's one of
That's a
my
good,
favorites too. I
isn't
love
that a
that. Oh
great movie? And I love Ruth Gordon. Rosemary, you're pregnant. She's always, she was just, and with all due respect to the North Jersey, New York diphthong, I love the way she talks. I really do.
Oh yeah.
She's pregnant. She's got the voice of the boroughs she had.
You do
Um,
that
uh,
very well.
I have a variety of imitations that come out sometimes involuntarily. So yeah, and your books feature the you have three books in a series so far, because there going
Yes,
to be
so
more in
far.
the series so far in the series, and that is your it's Widdershins, Solitary Fire, and Path of Shadows.
Yes.
And your heroine. Tell me a little bit more about your heroine in this trilogy.
Christina Lafage is a poor 18th century French girl. She hates the small village she lives in. You know, she sees like there are these rich people riding by in carriages and say, wow, I wish that was me. And one day she meets a witch in a wooded grove who offers her an apprenticeship. So she readily accepts that and she eagerly sells her soul and learns learns to all the aspects of the black arts. She learns to bend the laws of nature to her will. Everything from spell casting to demon raising, but it's what she learns about herself that really brings her full circle.
Well, I love the title of the first book, which is Widdershins, and I'd always understood that to mean counterclockwise.
Going
And
to
the
the left.
only I gotta shout out to some friends. The only reason I know that is back in high school, some friends of mine formed a band called Widdershins. I'm like, what was that? And that's how I learned the word. Um, but yeah, it's counterclockwise, so it's definitely. Well, I think she's kind of a neat heroine. I think I like that. And I've done some. I confess I haven't fully finished it, but I mean I've gotten into it, and it's a fun read. And I think the adventure quality is a lot of fun. But I love that she's independent. So many
Yeah.
books that try to incorporate history, interest, and there's definitely some attractions and things like that. They sort of like follow this, I don't know, this kind of patriarchal formula of ooh, save me, and
Mm.
the strong women aren't usually at the forefront, and I think that was a wonderful feature of the series.
Oh, thank you. I didn't want Christina to be a damsel in distress. Christina doesn't wait for any man to save her.
No, and it doesn't, and I like that it doesn't mean that she's dislikes them. It just means that,
Mm.
and there's nothing wrong with you like or like. No, don't write me letters, people. It doesn't matter who you like and who you don't. But I mean, it's so often, and horror occult fiction, if it isn't going truly off the rails into horror, into keep you up late at night and gross you out horror, then it usually tends to lead toward like your Anita Blake series, your some of your more I don't want to say erotic horror, but it is usually it's relationship based.
Mm. I mean,
And I
it's
think
in there. It's in there where it's needed, but it's not the focus of the story.
which is I think very refreshing.
Yeah.
I think I don't care about my anybody else's relationship. I really don't. So it's kind of, but I am really interested in somebody's journey, and that's what you've got going on here. I mean, you start with Widdershins, and she's sort of developing her gifts,
Hmm.
and now that's the other thing. Are they gifts or are they curses, or did she have them? Did she always have it in her? Did she have to kind of like barter for it? How'd that work?
It was given to her. She had to sell her soul to get it. She did
Uh,
it willingly.
and that's, yeah, and I like that too. that she volunteered. She wasn't tricked into it.
She wanted
just that is remarkably cool and honest. But I think a lot of people are gonna enjoy the fact that you're calling into question, I think, a little bit of what we consider good versus bad, and pulling into that gray area, because and a lot of popular television and movies will do this, is take somebody who's not entirely good or not entirely bad. We seem to like to throw people to one side or the other, and then you get like somebody like a Dexter in the middle. And what I enjoyed about your characters is you're exploring that gray area in a big way, and letting folks kind of decide where their moral compass points, because sometimes things aren't necessarily black and white.
Right. I mean, you'll see she does have a part. As you read further into the series, you'll see that.
And what's the feedback like? What does the Magick community think of your books?
I hope they like them. So far, anybody I've met at a convention, they say, "Oh God, I read your books. I love them. I love them. When's the next one coming out? What are you doing now?" So far, I've gotten really good feedback, and I'm very grateful for that.
That's excellent. I mean, because your challenge, I mean, it's a challenge, like, like you said, she's not being tricked. I mean, I think it's very cool the way that works. And when you go into that, the conventions are definitely an experience.
Oh, if you're a horror author, that's definitely the way to go. I mean, I did a couple of bookstore signings, and you're there for a couple of hours. Maybe you sell a couple books, maybe you don't. But, the horror conventions, that's your audience. That's where they are.
Right.
And they're very receptive, and they're happy to be there. Everybody's in a good mood. Everybody's happy. So I just think that doing the
they serve booze, that, right?
Oh yeah, that's true. That helps too.
See, the bookstores, all you get is scones.
Scones and coffee.
Scones and coffee. You got to go where they serve the booze to sell the book. But all kidding aside, it is a great venue. I mean, and there's a lot of inspiration to be had, and I love. So like I'm also a vendor there as well, under the sponsorship of the podcast, and it's I think I love the cosplay. I love the whole vibe of it. I like that it brings a lot of fans together.
Oh yeah, you don't get that at Barnes and Noble.
No, you don't. You definitely don't. I think my favorite cosplay was not this con, but although I see great ones every con, not this one, but the one before in March, which was very Dexter based. And someone, a beautiful young lady, came in dressed as the Matsuka, the fellow who's the forensic analyst along with Dexter, and she nailed it. I saw so many fun. So it's like I said, it's a lot of fun to connect with people that way, and to now another book that you've got outside of that is the I know you have the trilogy, the one that was the one set in Baltimore.
Yeah, that's Blood Moon Over the Chesapeake.
That's it. Thank you. I had it written down, but I couldn't find the title. Blood Moon Over the Chesapeake. I mean, Baltimore is a great city. Tell me why Baltimore. I love it, but I'm curious what inspired you.
My mother's family comes from Baltimore, and I still have cousins in Glen Burnie. I still have cousins in Southern Maryland. And one day I was going through some old documents and old papers, and they were all from Baltimore. I was like, this looks really cool. Baltimore's a really old city. There's a lot of ghost stories in Baltimore too. It's like,
very much.
I want to pick this for my, for the setting of my next story.
It is a very, very cool city. I've enjoyed Fells Point very much. It's a nice, neat area, and that was Poe's city too. There's another.
Yeah.
I've always thought he was kind of an interesting. I think he was an interesting study in literature as well.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That whole area, like where it's funny where the Poe house is, like the rest of the area doesn't really look all that literary.
It's a little scary.
It's a rough area, but I still think you go during the day. It's a great place to visit. And Fells Point, I believe, was the old ye olde drinking grounds, because there's still quite a few taverns in and around that area, and Baltimore's definitely got a haunting appeal all its own. I think the
does.
older
It does.
cities do. Philadelphia,
Mm,
Providence, Boston, Baltimore. You're going to get that almost a colonial. Uh, I say colonial. This isn't in colonial time, but that colonial era feeling, even to this day, you still have
mm.
the little bit because there's so much of the architecture. So you've got stuff in France. Are you primarily into like that whole 18th, 19th century, or?
I like a lot of history. But whether it's, regular history, ancient history, witchcraft history in particular. That's I read so many books and occult books. I thought, let me put some of this knowledge to use. Let me incorporate this into what I'm writing.
Well, it's fun to get the fantastic from the factual.
Yeah.
I think that's a great inspiration right there. Oh, I love witchcraft history, and like I'm from maybe about 75 minutes south of Salem, Massachusetts originally, and it's because that's about it's anywhere between an hour and 20 and an hour and a half from where I grew up, and what happened. What do you think really happened there?
Uh, I think a lot of it was politically motivated. I think,
Oh yes.
if you accuse someone of witchcraft, like, oh, like if I accuse this old woman of witchcraft, she has a lot of nice property. That could be mine. So let's get rid of her. We'll call her a witch. We'll get rid of her. And but who knows? That something could have been going on there, or it could have just been, teenage girls listening to stories from Tituba the slave.
I think I think you're spot on though, because and I don't know if for those that are listening, one of the things that happened in Salem when you were accused of witchcraft, your assets were seized,
Yeah.
and you had to pay for as you know, you had to pay for your
Hmm.
days, your upkeep in jail, and most people were in jail long enough to bankrupt them, and then the state or the town got their land in collateral, and then was able to sell it off uh, to make any kind of money they could for having had you in jail and you defaulting on your debt.
Hmm.
So, like you said, if you had a back 40 and you didn't want to sell it and your neighbor wanted to buy it and he accuses you of witchcraft and you're in the clink long enough, basically that goes up for grabs and he can offer pennies on the acre and Bob's your
Hmm.
uncle. He's got your property.
Yeah.
And that I think that was I think when you boil a lot of this stuff down, it never comes down to religion. It always comes down to
No.
money.
Yeah.
It really does. It always comes down to money. And I think that, there was, I mean, it's gruesome what happened. And I
Hmm.
think that whenever you give, and I'm going to say this very carefully, but it's nicely allegorical. I think whenever you give someone who is a zealot and not smart too much power, you're going to get these kinds of situations.
Yeah. There's always going to be a problem.
There's gonna be
A
a
big problem.
problem. Exactly. Whether it's, the witchcraft trials, what happened at the Capitol. Oh, sorry, did that slip out? Just kidding. Don't write me letters, people. Um, there's a lot going on there. I love the history of that because I think it's kind of cool. I always wonder. I come from a family of herbalists on my mom's side from Portugal. And I always wonder, what was their life like? How much persecution did they face? The old
Mm.
world's a little different in the fact that they kind of tolerate, to some degree. Well, Iberians notoriously were intolerant of witches. I think we can all agree, at least, in that whole Inquisition thing. But after that, they called them in Portugal, they called them curandeiras. And curandeiras, they were just like herbalists. And that
Mm.
was somebody you sought out to help your cow make it through the winter, if it was having, respiratory issues. And while you were there, can you help my kid out? He's got the cold too, and everything, that kind of stuff. And, those types of people have been throughout history helpers. And I think they
Yeah,
kind of get a
healers,
bad
yeah.
rap. Healers and helpers, and they
Hmm.
kind of get a bad rap. I think it just got ugly from there. And I wonder what they would think now to see that so many people who identify as witches or who practice witchcraft of varying disciplines and types are able to be so open about it. Do you think
Yeah,
that's come full circle? Can everybody be out now?
I think so. I think it's accepted more, you know, even 50 years ago or so. That's when I think that's when people just started to come out. There were more books being published. There were more people practicing, more people talking about it. I think it's more
Well,
acceptable now.
I think Gerald, we'll blame Gerald Gardner for that. I think he
Yeah.
brought a lot of, I once had a chance to interview Ray Buckland over the phone, and he was delightful to talk to. Very,
Oh,
of course,
wow.
very erudite, very, very cool man. And at one point, because I'm a bit of a cheeky person, I did ask him, I said, all right, Dr. Buckland, I got to ask you, just full stop, got to tell me, was Wicca your senior thesis for your degree in anthropology at Oxford? Did you invent this to see if it would stick? And he's like, "Oh, you're such a cheeky girl." He was just laughing at me. He never denied it. But the thing is I thought it was brilliant what he did, and I wasn't saying it in any disrespectful way. I was sort of saying it was kind of interesting because I thought it was a great blend of old and new.
Exactly. It's a blend of a lot of things, like, herbs and nature worship and all that stuff.
I think it took some of the vagueness from historical, because up until books like that Gardner wrote, that Buckland wrote,
Hmm.
up until those kinds of books, people didn't have like a set path to follow. They didn't have the recipes. They knew the dishes existed, but they didn't have a formula
Hmm.
on how to cook them. And I think that's what that did. Now, one of the things I know is a pile of information on stuff like that in your books.
Oh yeah, I've read a lot. I mean, Christina is
Heavily
definitely not
researched.
Wiccan, but
We don't
there's
judge
a
here.
lot of no, there's a lot of left-hand path qualities in her. Um, so I wanted to put that in there,
I think,
especially with the title Widdershins.
yeah, counterclockwise. Nice. Well, I think, like I said, that goes back to what we had talked about a little bit earlier, where I really don't know that you can be so black and white in the era of the protagonist and the anti-hero, where that happens, where we can all be anti-heroes because we're all anti-heroes in our own life. We all got to make decisions that are based on our own personal moral compass, and provided that we think for ourselves, it may not be with the grain. You got
Right.
to do what you think is right, and you got to do what's right for yourself. And I think that a lot of the shadow work and the left hand path and all of those gray areas, I think those got a bad rap. I think people want to see, up until recently, I think it's now starting to break. The people needed to see, people, one set of guys in white hats, one set of guys in black hats,
Mm,
and it was easy that way. Angels and demons. There was
right.
nobody
But
in the
now we
middle.
have the guys in the gray hats.
Exactly. And I think that's more, I think that more of us are aligned that way. I
I think so
mean,
too. I mean, a lot of witches will say, "Oh no, I'm a white witch. I'm a white witch." But is there really such a thing? I mean, it kind of screws up the balance because you need that. You need light. You need dark to keep the balance. You can't just be, off on one side because it upsets the balance.
then you limp. Then you limp. Well, not to bring the Buddhists into this because they didn't ask for it, but I think of the yin and the yang. And I think that's a very nice visual that most people know that sort of
Mm.
illustrates the balance. Yeah, they didn't ask to be brought into this, but there they are. So, but, and I think, like I said, and the meaning of what is dark and what is evil. So many people that feel that they're on the side of right and they're on the side of
Mm.
might really aren't full of light, let's just say, and
No,
they're
but I guess
certainly
it
not enlightened.
no, no, but that's probably their perspective.
And it's hard, well, you can't, nobody can reason with a zealot. So
No.
what's next? So we have 3 books in the trilogy, and the fourth. What's the next book? Is that coming out?
I haven't started that yet, but I probably will soon. I like to start in the fall. I'm thinking about a prequel to Widderchins.
Oh, very cool.
Um, Everything that Madame Duchamp went through before she met
Right.
Christina in the Wooded Grove and took her under her wing. So I think that's where I'm going to go with that.
Well, that'll be exciting, and folks can find your books on Amazon. And
Yes.
they can find you by searching the author Eve Lestrange, and it's spelled just how it sounds, EVELESTRANGE. And you can keep up on news, events, and other goodies on evelestrange.com. Not to be forgotten that you're going to be in Hunt Valley, Maryland, September 30th through October 2nd for the Monster Mania Con convention that's there. Anything else you want to add in?
I think that's it. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm on there too.
Fantastic. Well, always good to talk to one in New Jersey's own. Thank you for helping me kick off the second season. Eve, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Rocky. I had a great time, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Macabre World. You can find us on the web at www.darkerartsstudio.com.